Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to Experiments in Crafting. Tonight I've got a project update for you. I've got my last Leither Co Box for a little while. I mentioned a while back that I was going to take a break. And when I went to uh, suspend the uh, subscription, um, it had already renewed for the month. So I took that last box, and so I've got a Leither Co Box, a project update, and then we talked a little bit about some Ravelry tips that I've talked a little bit about this in the past on other live streams, but I had mentioned some things during a stream that a couple of people didn't realize that you could do on Ravelry. And so I've got my laptop and I thought I would walk you through some of the things that I do on Ravelry. I also received a comment. I had asked people to let me know if they could think of anything that they wanted to talk about. And I received a comment asking for some motivation in finishing up some projects. And so I thought I would touch on that a little bit with Ravelry as well, because there are some sort of ways that you might be able to reward yourself kind of things um, using some of the things with Ravelry. So I guess I'll get into my project update. So I don't know if I got to show any of the pieces. Maybe I showed the teddy bear head, but this is the teddy bear that I've been working on, and I actually finished last weekend, and I really, really like how it turned out. This is the Teddy Bear William pattern by Elves World, and it's pretty good pattern. I liked how it was written. The joints on the pattern are movable if you follow the instructions on how to attach them. And so he's all posable and moves around. I maybe would have filled the body portion with beads or some weight. He does sort of have a tendency to tip over. So he's kind of just, you got to get him just right so that he's not, my laptop's a little bit in the way there. But you got to get him so he's just right. Otherwise, he'll stay, but just a little bit of effort. He doesn't really have any ability to stay upright on his own. But I really like the way that the pattern was written. I did change out the French knot eyes for the largest safety eyes that I owned, and I really like the way they turned out. I did a lot of extra shaping with this pattern that I don't normally do. So I spend a lot of time after the safety eyes were in. So the pattern does a really nice job of sort of shaping the head. And it's actually worked from the nose. It gets wider at a weird shape, but you can see exactly where the eyes go. And then it gets rounded out and then comes around to the back, and you finish the pattern right here in the center. And then the nose does a really nice job of hiding that original magic circle. And so what I really liked about the pattern is it did a really nice job of shaping the face, but after I put the eyes in and started to stuff it, I really wanted a little bit more shape. And so this was a trick that I had seen in the dragon pattern, but actually didn't do in the dragon pattern. But what I basically did was I started with yarn on one end, and I stuck my needle in pretty much as close to the eye as possible, and went directly across next to the eye over here. Pulled the needle out, moved it just a tiny bit, and went back in around the eye. And so I just kept stitching back and forth between the eyes. And so what you end up with is inside this bear's head, if I took all the stuffing out, inside there would be a whole bunch of yarn like this. Because, well, actually it would be connected, but there's a spider web of yarn in there, pulling the eyes towards each other. So there's a whole bunch of yarn pulling these eyes in so that it's got really nice depth in the sockets. The same thing is true of down by the legs. I pulled the leg portion in, and that was part of the instructions on the pattern, was to sort of make hip sockets. And then that's really what makes these legs able to flex really nice. And they don't stick out too terribly far on the doll. So like or on the bear. They're out a little bit, but they're not too bad. Because if you left this completely round and then just attach them on the outside, his hips are like way, way, way wider than his shoulders. And so it looks pretty bizarre. And so this allows him to sit pretty nicely. And like I said, I'm really happy with how this turned out. The only thing I probably would change is I probably would have stuffed the bear with darker stuffing. So I think I'm probably I shouldn't say this because after I finish my box of fiberfill, I probably will switch to using dyed wool roving or natural wool roving that is naturally colored to darker colors. So like dark sheep's wool or something like that. You can get roving pretty cheap if you buy sort of not top tier quality wool. So they're more and less desirable types of wool, and it doesn't matter if it's the nicest, softest wool if I'm gonna stuff it inside a teddy bear. And so I kind of like the idea of using the wool, and then I also like that it will not show through. So you can see in some of the spots on the teddy bear's face, his head's stuffed a little bit overstuffed, and you can start to see the stuffing. Especially on like the parts that are the roundest, and have to be stuffed the tightest, you can see the stuffing poking through, which is sort of cute, but also I would rather it didn't. The one big thing that I ran into a problem on with this bear was that it requires just a little bit more than 100 grams of worsted weight, and I had 100 grams. So I got the whole head done, the ears done, the arms done, the torso done, and I was down to the legs, and I had something like 30 grams of yarn, and I needed like 35 grams of yarn. And I made both legs, and they were a little bit too short, and I thought I was going to have to order another ball, and I used Premier Everyday Marble, I think is the name of the line. No, Medley. They're all marbly colors. I think this one's actually called Brown Marble. But it's Premier Everyday Medley, and I can't get it locally. And Premier's website says that they're taking 7 to 10 days to ship, and then it was like ground shipping. And I just didn't feel like waiting almost 3 weeks for my yarn to show up. So what I did was I ripped the legs completely out, and I switched to I had a different color of the Premier Everyday Medley. And so I did the bottoms of the feet in the other color and then did the leg portion. So you can see the bottoms of the feet are burgundy, and so then I worked the rest of the leg portion, and that was good enough. I ended up having to skip like 6 rows total, I think, out of the leg, but I was able to finish them, and I don't think it made a really significant difference in the length of the leg. So, and then I went back and added some more burgundy accents. So I put some little burgundy round pads on the arms, and then put a burgundy heart on the bear's chest. And so that kind of tied the whole thing together. The only thing I did not have enough yarn for was a tail. I tried a burgundy tail, and it didn't look all that cute. So I tried a couple of other colors. I did like black like the nose, and that looked dumb. And so he's just tailless. So maybe I'll decide to order another ball of the brown marble, or maybe I'll find a brown in my box back there that's close enough that it won't stick out weirdly. This brown marble is a really warm, like caramely brown, and I was having a hard time finding something that wasn't like grayer, or maybe it's bluer. I'm not really sure, but all of the browns that I had were very cold, and this one is really warm brown. So, anyway, that's my bear, and like I said, I'm really pleased with how it turned out. So, I'm in a little bit of a rut. I'm not sure what exactly I want to do next. I can't really decide. I've been really enjoying doing the amigurumi. I don't really need any more dolls, even though they're fun to make. I mean, I didn't need the first 3. I made the teddy bear. I like teddy bears. It was surprisingly difficult to find a decent teddy bear pattern. I went through a lot of patterns, and there are some really, really, like, there are some totally fine ones, but they just weren't for me. And then there were some really, like, I don't know if they're hyper realistic or hyper sad or what the style is, but they're heavily accented with possibly makeup or like paint, and they have like super sad, expressive eyes, and they kind of freak me out. So I spent a lot of time trying to find just like a cute teddy bear pattern that wasn't, I don't know, like too much. So this one was a really good one. But yeah, there's a lot of not at all for me teddy bear patterns out there. I didn't say hello, but hi to Jane Rogers, who said hi in the comments, and hi to anybody else out there watching. Welcome, and thanks for joining me tonight. The next thing I've got is my Leither Co Box. It's in a much greener box than normal. They're generally a lot more teal. Get this opened up. And like I said, this is probably the last one for a while. I've paused my subscription for now. Not because there was anything wrong with the box, but just because I was getting more yarn and more boxes that I could use. And I've really hit my limit on how many hand-turned hooks I probably ought to own. So I think I've got something like 23 of them. And while they are very nice, I don't really need another set of them. So, anyway, the Leither Co Box, I have no affiliation with or anything like that. It was just a box that I like to get, and I have fun unboxing them on stream. So, dig in here. All right, so the hook this month is a number 7 hook. Or, well, this is one of the things, I really like the Leither Co hooks, but this is one of the things that, I guess I want to say frustrated me a little bit. So this hook is marked 7, and so I don't immediately know whether this is a 7mm hook or a 4.5mm hook, which is a 7 hook. It's a 4.5mm hook because it's got the metal clover tip. So the 7mm clover hooks are plastic. So anyway, this is I'm trying to hold it still-ish. Huh? So this is the hook. It has a very nice handle. Kind of like a light pine looking handle, actually. And again, it's marked with a 7 on the bottom. And then, like I said, it's not always immediately clear whether the marking is, or, well, when you put 7, whether it's a millimeter marking or whether it's a size. So, on hook sizes, it goes B, C, D, E, F, G, 7. And then H, I, J, K. So, it's a little bit weird, but I do know that the clover hooks, the metal 7, because it's a clover hook with a metal tip and it's labeled 7, it's a 4.5mm 7 hook, because the 7mm are plastic hooks. So that is the hook that came with the set. There is also a hand-dyed yarn that comes in the deluxe box. This yarn is primarily a natural color, which is sometimes fun, but it does have gray and sort of a dark raspberry pink and a sort of pretty, like sage green. And then this is called Paris. It is an Aran weight yarn, which is a little bit heavier than a worsted weight, or sort of like a 4.5 if you're going with the numbers and the little skeins that are normally marked on a yarn. It's not quite a 5, but it's a little bit heavier than a 4. It is 181 yards per 100 grams. And then, let's see, what do we got in here? The last few things that come in the box are the booklet that describes like the whole collection and has the patterns. So you can get a wool deluxe box or a cotton deluxe box. Trying to see where the sort of table of contents, here it is. So here is the whole collection. The merino yarn Paris box. There was a cotton yarn Paris box, which looks like it contains very, very similar cotton. Sometimes the cotton and the merino look exactly the same, and then sometimes they're completely different yarns. It looks like there's a stitch marker, a keychain. The funfetti hook looks like it was sort of green and brown, pretty neutral colors for the funfetti. The natural hook was the one that I showed you. I get the wood tone natural ones. And then the project for the merino box is a pouch. And the project for the cotton box looks like it's a wall hanging. And then it also looks like it came with a button for the pouch. So I'll open those up. Let me see if there is a better zoomed in picture. I have to fold it so that I don't show the pattern, but that is... Oh, this is a crochet square, I guess. So there must be leftover yarn. Oh, yeah. It's fine. Yeah. So this is just a square. It's possibly for the leftover yarn. The pouch might not use the whole thing, or possibly you just make the square. I haven't actually looked into it because I just opened it, but that's the pouch. Sort of zoomed in picture a little bit better there. And so it looks like it's probably a square and uses the button that came with the kit. And then the wall hanging. Looks like this. So it's pretty pale, sort of cotton candy-ish colors in the cotton yarn, it looks like. Or it's probably the same, they just don't dye quite as deeply on cotton. Alright, and then, as I mentioned, there's a stitch marker. The stitch marker is the Eiffel Tower. So it's just this little Eiffel Tower. And then there is a little baggie, or sort of organza bag, of a airplane with a passport and a thing that says every journey starts with one step. So it's just a cute little keychain. And there is a button. It's just a wood button, sort of just like a image of Paris. Kind of looks like Mod Podged on, and it just says Paris. that is the Paris collection from the Leither Co Box. So it's pretty cute. Get this all packed up and put away, and I think that's everything in the box. All right. Jane likes the patterns, and then there's a comment from Andrea who wanted to thank me for sharing the Mini Crochet Creatures book. She made them last week. Oh, she made 3 of them last week. I actually thought about pulling the Mini Crochet Creatures book out the other day and just making a couple of little bitty ones. They looked a lot more, I guess they looked a lot quicker than some of the patterns that I've been doing recently. Though, really, this teddy bear only took me, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. And I was not working on it too heavily. So, I don't know. That was relatively quick. But yeah, the Mini Crochet Creatures looks pretty cute. So, I'm glad you liked it. All right, I am going to switch over to my laptop. And I've got Ravelry open. And one of the things that came up was I was actually talking about books. And so we'll use the Mini Crochet Creatures as an example. Hopefully it works out. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So from Ravelry, when you come in and do the advanced search, and you type in here, one of the things that we talked about was if you were thinking about buying a book and you wanted to know what was in it. My space bar is a little fussy. Okay. So I'm on Amazon. I want to see what's in this book. I'm not sure if it's worth buying the whole book. And I decide, well, maybe I'll hop over on Ravelry and check and see what's in it. So this one does not look like it's particularly well documented, I guess. So it's only got 9 of the patterns, and there's only a picture for one of them. So that's not great. But generally, what we're looking for, let me find a different title. Let's try the Designer Crochet book. So if we look for Designer Crochet, and what we want is sources. So this just showed me designers with crochet in their name, which is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for sources. Well, I'm not doing great in finding things. That is what it's called. Okay. Found it by throwing a last name in there as well. All right, let's try this. So Designer Crochet shows me that there are 32 patterns in there. This one's not done very well either. I guess I should have picked one out that I knew. Barker, I think, has a good book. All right, this one's done better. So generally, I don't have quite this much trouble finding the listings of patterns, but this is a book that I really liked the cover pattern, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to spend the money to get the whole book just because I liked the one wrap on the cover. So you can pop over from Amazon, pull up Ravelry, look up your book, and then just sort of take a look at the other patterns in the book. So this is the cover photo, is the Gaithersburg stole. And so you can see what the pattern looks like. You can see projects that people have made out of it. Those are sort of standard Ravelry features. But this feature here, where you can see all of the patterns in the book, Now, there's a couple in here that nobody has made, and nobody took an image out of the book for those patterns. But you get a feel for what's in the book, because I find that Amazon isn't particularly good about showing you all of the things. Even if they might give you the names of all of the things, and then you could go individually look them up. But I generally, I want to see everything in the book. So this is just one way that you can find out whether it's worth doing that. You can also do this with magazines. So if you're considering, maybe I want to do, so like maybe I want to see if I want to subscribe to Interweave Crochet. If you get into, so you can search for Interweave. It dumped me in the spring 2004 for some reason. But when you're on a magazine page, there's this drop down here that will let you see all of the editions. And so I can pull up the winter 2021 edition and see whether that has patterns in it that I like. So I can kind of flip through here. Looks like it has this pullover, a scarf, a wall hanging, some garland, some table runners, all kinds of different patterns. Looks like a variety of both clothing and sort of household things, though more heavily on the clothing than on the household in at least this issue. And if I'm thinking about subscribing for a year, I might want to look at like a year's worth of patterns. So this one has a couple of amigurumi. It looks like 3 of them actually, and a blanket that goes with them, and a basket. So this one's more heavily not on clothes. So you can kind of just flip through, but I find Ravelry to be a pretty good source on what's how do I want to say this? I like to use Ravelry to do like some investigation. So before I commit to buying things, because you can kind of look through and see whether, like, I can't flip through the Interweave Crochet magazine, but I get a pretty good idea of what came in it. You can also sometimes, not always, but sometimes, if you really just like the cover photo, you can sometimes come here and just buy the cover pattern. So let me see here. Like, if I picked up this copy and I thought, oh, I'd maybe like to subscribe, but actually really all I want to do is make this squirrel, I can click here and see if I can buy just the pattern. And it looks like you can just buy the pattern straight from Interweave. You can also find out who the designer is, and maybe the designer makes similar patterns that you'd be interested in. So this owl was not part of the magazine, but it might be for sale separately. It's actually part of a different magazine called Crochet Now, but anyway, you can kind of look around, find new designers, find different patterns by those designers, do some things like that. So it can be a good just resource in finding new things. Stamping Bandit said she just subscribed to Happily Hooked. I was a subscriber for Happily Hooked for a long time, and I just found that I wasn't using enough of the patterns to be worth it for me. I just, at the rate that I got patterns, I just wasn't using them. And I'm pretty picky, and I sort of moody, I guess. And so like I have to be in the mood for a particular pattern. So anyway, you can also come and look at Happily Hooked and see what types of patterns are in there, and, do a little bit of searching around like this. So that was one of the things that I want to make sure you guys knew, that this source part of Ravelry exists. So you can look up just individual patterns, if you know the name of the pattern. But this ability to look through um, what they call sources, basically like chunks of patterns. So like in a magazine, in a book, in a newsletter, I guess, if it was sufficiently distributed. They have these collections of patterns. Stampin' Bandit said that's definitely a fire hose of patterns. Yeah, Happily Hooked. I was doing Happily Hooked and the pattern pack at the same time, and it was so many patterns and many things that not that I don't want to say like a lot of things that I wasn't interested in, but just a lot of things that I just didn't need those patterns at the time that they came in. And so, not that they weren't good patterns, but just not for me at the time when the magazine came in. And then by the time I maybe wanted them, I sort of forgot that I owned them. And so it just wasn't totally for me. I subscribe to Interweave Crochet right now, and I'm probably going to cancel that as well, just for the same reason. I get a lot of patterns and they're beautiful, but I just can't use them as fast as they come in, and they're just not what I'm after most of the time. So I don't make sweaters, I don't make a lot of clothing, and it's a lot of clothing. And so, yeah. Anyway, if you guys have questions about Ravelry, or some things that like that, I'd be happy to try and help you through some parts of that, if that would be helpful. One of the other things, somebody left me a comment saying that they wanted to finish up all of their projects this year. Like, that was their goal for the year. And one of the things I wanted to point out is there's a spot in here for projects. And depending on what type of person you are and what motivates you, getting them all into Ravelry might be motivating. And then really sort of tracking your progress and sort of ticking them off. So this one's showing as a work in progress. Actually, this shawl is totally done and blocked and everything, so I need to update this. But I don't put as many projects as I'd like to into Ravelry, which is really, it's bad on my part because I use the project part of Ravelry so heavily. So if I go and check out a new pattern, for example, these, Heart of a Rock Star fingerless gloves, I go immediately to the project page. And then I want to see what they look like in different yarns. And like, oh, here, this looks really nice in a solid. This looks nice in a solid. I don't like them as much in a variegated. They look fine, but they're not as much for me. These are mine in a solid. There's probably a couple of mine in here, possibly. Might be the only ones uploaded. I've made these gloves like 6 times, so I really ought to have more projects in here so people can see more. But anyway, all of that to say, I use the project page heavily, and so I really ought to contribute more. And so in my sort of recommendation in how to motivate yourself to finish projects up, one of the ways might be to get your projects into Ravelry so that you can see them all laid out in front of you, and then sort of like motivate yourself to like get them all done. So as you get to, mark them complete and take them off your work in progress and move them to completed projects, put in details, and really sort of track it, and you can share it with other people and things like that. So, Stampin' Bandit saying you need to be excited about them, referring to getting too many patterns and not really wanting to make them when they come in. She says she's debating trying the Naughty Lady Knit sub box. It's knit and crochet. Watching some of their unboxings is intriguing. They do tell you the designer in the unboxing. Nice patterns. Okay. I haven't heard of that one, but I might search around for another sub box. I probably will take a break for a little while. Yeah, it's a knit, but it's also crochet. At least that's what she was saying. But it's I probably will take a little bit of a break. I think I'm a little bit overwhelmed in yarn and yarn accessories and patterns. And I kind of just need to work through a little bit of my yarn and a little bit of like the heaps of projects. I mean, I can show you my Ravelry library, and it's like 90 pages of, that's 40 pages of just patterns that I've dumped in here. I use my library a little bit different than I think Ravelry wants you to. You used to be able to add any pattern to your library, whether you owned it or not. And now they kind of stop you from doing that, and there's a little bit of a way around it. So if I find a pattern that I like this one here, that's a pretty cool pattern. You can go in here. If it's a paid pattern, when you hit add to library, it says you don't own it. Are you sure you want to add it? And I just said, yes, I own it. It doesn't make any difference as far as I can tell to anybody but Ravelry, whether I own it or not. So the only thing it won't let you do is if I say, yes, I own it, and then I go to my library and try to open it, I don't own it on Ravelry, so it won't let you open it. So once you buy it, then it'll let you download it and open it and whatnot. So it's not a workaround to not pay for it or anything like that. It's just you tell them you own it, and they probably assume you bought it on Etsy. Maybe it goes into their metrics on how many people are buying it from them versus somewhere else or something crazy like that. But anyway, I dump everything into my library. I think they want you to use favorites for patterns that you want but haven't bought. And I don't like having them in two separate spots. I don't want the patterns that I own and the patterns that I want to own or want to do in separate tabs. I want to see them all. So I just have been dumping patterns into here. Obviously on free patterns, when you hit the add to library, then you just own it and you can download it. Or on patterns that are paid, but Ravelry doesn't host them. So usually it's an independent, like a third-party site. Like if the designer has the pattern listed on Ravelry, but you can't buy it from Ravelry, you can only buy it from Etsy, it will let you add those patterns without saying, yes, I own it, because it's not available for sale on Ravelry. So anyway, this is how I sort of use Ravelry, and then sometimes I'll just go through my library until I find something that I used to like, or not used to like, but liked at some point enough to add to my library. And then sometimes I scroll through here and wonder how the heck things ended up here. Like, how did this amigurumi mouse with big eyes end up in my library? Because not really for me. So anyway, like, I wonder what was going through my head at the point that it ended up in my Ravelry library. Sometimes you come across a knitting pattern. There are a handful of knitting patterns that I've found on, like, they're free for a day or something like that, and I've added them just because they're beautiful. These shawls here were giveaways that are just stunning, so I had to add them, even though I don't knit, because maybe one day I will. So, let's see. Crafty Caitlin's asking if I have ideas on good stash busting project ideas. I I guess it depends on what exactly you mean by stash busting. Some people use that term to talk about like the leftover skeins out of projects that, say it was a ball of Red Heart Super Saver and it was 150 grams and they used 100 grams and now they've got 50 and it's not really enough to do much with, but they've got this half a ball or third of a ball sitting around that needs to be used up. And then some people use it in sort of a sense of, I own way too much yarn and I need to get rid of it. And so that's sort of the mindset that I've been feeling recently, is that I just own so much yarn and I need to just work through it. So I guess the way that the way I approach it is I pick a yarn that I want to use. So let's say it's just a ball of, we'll pick on the Premier Everyday Medley that I used for the teddy bear. So what you can do is you can go to Ravelry and then search Premier Everyday Medley. And you can go in and see what people, not stashes, projects. So when you get to the Premier Everyday Medley page, you get dumped into all of the information about the yarn. And you can come over here to projects, and not very many people have worked with it. There's only 36 projects. And you can scroll down and see what people have done. So that might give you an idea of what that yarn might look cool. Like what kind of project might look cool in that yarn. And so there's a bunch of different options here. There are a lot of hats, some fingerless gloves, some amigurumi. So that's one way to go about how to, like, I have this yarn and I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. You can at least go and see what other people did with it. The other way to go about this is to go to patterns and hit advanced search and put in some details about what you think you might want to do. So let's again say that it's Premier Everyday Medley. It's a 100-gram ball, so it's about 220-ish yards, I would imagine. So let's scroll down to, did I skip it? I want yarn weight. Yeah, yarn weight. So it's a worsted weight yarn. And let's say I have 2 balls to use up. They're 220 yards a piece. So I could use part of a ball, I could use a whole ball, or I could use 2 balls. So we're going to look at all of the patterns from 0 to 450 yards because that's as much as I have. And then now I'm looking at all of the crochet patterns that are in worsted weight that are somewhere between 0 and 450 yards for the whole project. And so there's this itty bitty little mask holder, this pair of slippers, you've got washcloths. Maybe you know that you're thinking, I don't know, I think I'd like to make a scarf. And so if you start typing the word scarf, you get these things that drop down. If I hit enter right now without clicking this category, it's going to search the word scarf. So somewhere in the description of these patterns, it has the word scarf. It might be in the title. It might be in the designer's name. So like when I was searching bear, I would get all of Heidi Bear's patterns because her name has the word bear in it. Even when the stuffed animal that she was showing was a hippopotamus or whatever, because it just is searching for the word. So if you search the word, you end up a lot of times not getting exactly what you want. In this case, I'm going to back this up, start typing it again, and I'm going to choose the category scarf. I'm then also going to type in cowl because actually I don't really care if it's a scarf or a cowl. And so you can see it says scarf or cowl, crochet, worsted, and 0 to 450 yards. So now I'm looking at all of the scarves and cowls that I could make with the yarn that I have on hand. And I think this is a really good way to figure out what you're going to do with what you already bought. I do this a lot with fingering weight yarns. I really like buying fingering weight yarns. And so I have to, well, not only do I really like buying them, I almost only buy one skein. I almost never buy multiples or have enough to do like a whole sweater or something like that. So if in that example, I'm going to clear everything out. So I'm going to clear the search and let's start over. So I want only crochet patterns because I don't knit. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to choose light fingering and fingering because they don't really make that big of a difference. And one skein of fingering weight yarn is usually between 450 and 550 yards. And so I'm going to pick the 450 to 600 category. This is now showing me all the things on Ravelry that are crochet, done in fingering weight yarn, and 450 to 600 yards. I'm going to pause for just a second and check on comments. Helen's asking if these patterns we can purchase. Helen, the thing that we're looking at right now is Ravelry, and hopefully you're familiar with that. But if you're not, I strongly suggest that you sign up for an account and start looking around. Ravelry is sort of the pattern encyclopedia for all things crochet and knitting. So if it exists somewhere in the crochet and knitting world, it's almost certainly on Ravelry. And that includes patterns. It includes forums with like help. It includes all of the information about yarn, and it's a place that you can upload all of your projects, and you can even upload all the yarn you own, all of the crochet hooks you own. It's sort of like one central location for you to manage all of your patterns. And yes, there are patterns for sale. There are patterns for free. There's just information about patterns that might be available only in print copy. So usually if you get into page, like at the end of a search, you get into patterns that are just like scanned in copies from a crochet leaflet from, a 1950s magazine that somebody for some reason scanned in. It doesn't look like it's showing up in this search, but a lot of times the very end pages are sort of a wasteland of old patterns. But anyway, but yes, certainly all of the patterns on Ravelry, I guess I shouldn't say all of the patterns. Most of the patterns on Ravelry are either for sale or free. Some of them might be out of print and just are reference that they exist or existed at one point. Crafty Caitlin was confirming, yes, the second one, that she just has too much yarn and she wants to get through that. So this example is a good way of getting through your yarn. And I'll pop back to my example in just one second. Stamping Bandit said she bought a sweater quantity of Knitcrate, and it's gorgeous and still on the shelf. So this is, again, another way, if you know how much you have on the shelf, we can take a look at that in just a second. And then Elizabeth says, hi, hello, and welcome. So we can see if Knitcrate has their yarns loaded in here. So let's look at Knitcrate. None of these are Knitology, so I don't know who actually made the yarn for Knitcrate. nope, that yarn is not coming up. So, um, if you know what the weight and the yardage is, and how much you bought, we can kind of look around. So it's 900 grams. Well, let me jump back to my other example, and we'll see if we get a little bit more detail on that yarn. So back to my example of buying single skeins of sock yarn. So I've got crochet, I've got light and regular fingering weight yarn. I've chosen 450 to 600 yards. So this is roughly a single skein of fingering weight yarn. And then I can just start scrolling through and see, oh, maybe I would like to turn that one random ball. Where do I have a random ball here? So I pulled this one out of my stash. And it's from the Knitted Wit, and it's a sock yarn. So it looks like this, and it's mostly black with hints of purple and sort of neon yellow and neon green, and there's some burgundy or not burgundy, but like sort of pink in there. It is called Voyagers, and it is 420 yards. So it's a little bit shy of the setting that I've got set right now. We can scroll down and turn on 300 to 450 as well. So that gives me both of those ranges. And then I can just scroll through and see, well, I don't think this hat is a good option for this yarn because it's got a lot going on, and this hat needs a pretty plain yarn to work with it. But this cowl has got a lot going on, and it's not really all about the pattern. There's different textures in there to sort of break up the pattern from pooling, but that would be a good option. And so you can kind of just hunt around looking for matches for the yarn you have and what you think it'd look good with. This Outlander shawl here has kind of a heavily variegated yarn in it, so it might work with that. And just kind of hunt around looking for something. If you have an idea of what you might want to make, so say I kind of actually want to make socks out of my sock yarn, I can just pull up the category socks. And again, I didn't search the word socks. I started typing it and then used one of the drop downs. The drop downs will pull everything from the category. If you search a word, it searches the word. So, and if you wanted to stop searching a word, you can just clear the word out and hit search again, and it'll search for an empty field again. So it won't filter by anything. And so now I'm just looking at all of the crochet socks that I could do with one skein of fingering weight yarn. So there's some socks with accent heels, there's some yoga socks, all kinds. Or maybe instead of socks, I want to do fingerless gloves. And again, there's a category for fingerless gloves. And I can just search through. These don't look crocheted at all. Those are really pretty. But not a good match for this yarn. Like this variegated yarns or speckly yarns like this need a very specific type of pattern that really isn't bothered by all of the crazy color. You need something where the colors can do their own thing and don't require you don't want to have to see a whole lot of cables or anything like that. Cables and stuff get lost in the mix. Okay. Stampin' Bandit had a little more information about the yarn. So it's in the Yarnology. So let's look at Yarnology yarns. Oh, Knitology. Whoops. Okay, and it is Sheen. Or Sheen? All right, so she says she's got sweater quantities of this particular yarn, roughly 900 grams, and they are 400 yards apiece. So she's got something like 3,600 yards. First thing we can do is look at projects. So what have other people done with this particular yarn? So we can first go to colorways, and the only colorway is the colorway that she has. So all of these projects are all going to be done in that color. And so you can start looking through to see what people have done. And one of the things I'm noticing is that most people have not used quite as much as she owns. So this is a 3 skein. The rest of these, so there's a sweater here. I think one of the important things that you can learn about the yarn that you have and projects that people have done is it looks like this yarn has a tendency to pool oddly, or not oddly, but like can shift around. So this is sort of an effect of shaping. The pattern got wider, and so the pooling changed. And so the pooling is very different on the arms, where there's a couple of spots where it's striped, and then a couple of spots where it's all this wavy kind of river look to it. But that changes as the sweater changes size. So it's just something to keep in mind. If you don't want this look, then you might have to go with something open and lacy, or change it around. It's pretty color, but it does pool differently. You can see how on this shawl, it's not nearly as regular and like flowy because there's holes built in. And so the difference between this sweater being kind of a lot to look at and this shawl being more open, it's using the same yarn but in a different way. And so sometimes you have to find a pattern that works well with the yarn. This shawl, which is a lot tighter knit than the other one. Actually, this shawl looks like 2 totally different shawls. But it has these tighter sections, and it looks like it works up really nicely in these sort of back and forth rows. So it might be better to work it up in those shorter back and forth rows than it is to work up in the giant round rows. And then you can even see that it looks totally different on this sweater that this person made. So there's a little bit more of that pooling happening, but it's a little less aggressive than in this one. And so it all has to do with pattern and size and all sorts of things. But the end result is you can sort of see how this yarn is going to behave and what you might need to watch out for. And then certainly you don't have to do any of these patterns. What you can do is pop back over to patterns. Get into advanced search. I've already forgotten what weight yarn that was. So let's go back to the details page. It is a fingering weight yarn, 400 yards, 100 grams. All right, so let's jump back over to patterns again, back into advanced search. I am going to just stick with crochet patterns because that's what I like. Though certainly feel free to turn on knitting patterns if you knit. So let's say we're going to pull up fingering weight yarn. We have 2,100 yards plus, but maybe we're willing to do some smaller projects, and you don't mind doing 2 separate projects maybe. So we'll turn on those fields, and then maybe we actually want to work a sweater. We have sweater quantities, so let's turn on the sweater category. And so here we can see all of the crochet sweaters, but we know that just a plain solid sweater might pool weirdly. So maybe this is not the pattern, or like Stamping Bandit says, maybe the people who didn't have the weird pooling happening alternated skeins per row, and so maybe that's just an option. But alternatively, we can try and find something a bit more open, like maybe this pullover, where we know it doesn't pool nearly as badly in a lacy option. And so it looks like this sweater takes 2,200 yards on the largest size. And so you've got plenty to do that. Open lacy things generally take a little less yarn. And so if you need 2 in a small size, you almost have enough to do 2 full sweaters in a small size. So, anyway, that's a little bit of how I use Ravelry. I tend to use Ravelry as a resource and make it work for me. So if I want something out of it, like I want to know what I should make out of this, I can go find this yarn and see what people did with it. I can, even if you're out shopping and you think you want to buy this, but maybe you're not a person who buys hand-dyed yarn very regularly, and you're just not sure what you're going to make with it or if it's worth it, and you want to see what people did with it. Like, I can pop over and find this yarn. It's a little bit trickier with hand-dyed yarns because they're not always on there. But let's hop over and let me double check and make sure that this isn't a special base. This is just the fingering weight. It doesn't say, so I'm going to assume, oh wait, it is 80/20 nylon. Yeah. So it's the Victory sock. It's not 100% merino. And it looks like this base has been discontinued, so that's good to know. But let's take a look at colorways and see if this Voyagers is in there. Looks like they're arranged basically alphabetically, so I don't see this color showing up. Let's double check and see if Knitted Wit has a different 80/20 sock yarn. Well, we can go over here and sort by fingering weight. That's one thing to do. And here's a different sock yarn. This one's not discontinued, but there's only 2 colors in there. So, like I said, you got to kind of bounce around a little bit when you're looking at hand-dyed yarns, because they're not always terribly up to date. It relies on the yarn dyer going in and making sure everything is up to date for their page, and sometimes they're just so busy just keeping everything going that Ravelry updates are not terribly high on the list. It is also possible that they put, like, sometimes people will put like a number or something and they end up missorted. So you can see these are roughly in alphabetical order, but sometimes like a typo or something will jump it up in a place that it's not supposed to be. Like here, there's a the in there that's putting it in with the T's instead of with a V. So you got to just be careful, but it doesn't look like the color that I have is on here. But anyway, I can pop over to projects and see what other people have done with these sock yarns. And so I can just kind of scroll through, and it looks like the vast majority of people actually made socks. Which is pretty normal. This person made a tiny sweater. There's a couple hats, some shawls, so there's a lot of stuff going on. But I guess the sort of summary here is that you can get Ravelry to do a lot of things for you, and sort of take the guesswork out of a lot of crocheting. It's a really good, or knitting. It's a really good resource for finding out about a yarn, finding out about a book that you might want to buy, looking into things like whether you're going to subscribe to a catalog, or not a catalog, but a magazine. Maybe you're thinking about buying yarn online, and since there's been no yarn shows because of, all of the COVID things shutting everything down, big events like that, and you really want to buy something from Knitted Wit, but you're thinking, I don't know, $24, $25, $26 for a skein of yarn is a little bit more than I want to spend without seeing it. You can pop over and see what other people have thought. There's review sections. There's a lot of comments. There's a whole section of Ravelry that I don't even generally use, which is their community section, which has tons of forums and people who will talk about literally any sub aspect of the knitting and crochet world. So I'm near positive that there's probably a Leither Co community section. There's probably one for your favorite designer. It could also be a way to get involved in pattern testing. Some people really like a particular designer's patterns, but either don't have the extra income to spend on buying patterns, or really just struggle to motivate themselves but do better on a timeline. So if you pattern test for people, a lot of times they hold you to a deadline. And so if you need some extra motivation, maybe doing some pattern testing for somebody is a way to sort of kick up your motivation. But I use Ravelry in any number of different ways. I'm on Ravelry probably every single day. Sometimes it's just scrolling through patterns looking for the next best thing. And sometimes it's just, hunting around for interesting new things happening on there. So, if you're not using Ravelry or you're underutilizing Ravelry, hopefully this helps you out some. If you're stuck in a little bit of a rut, sometimes this is a really good way to get yourself out of it. So you can either look around and see what you can do with a yarn you own, or research a yarn that you've been considering buying, or just find a pattern that you really want to do, and figure out what yarn you need to buy to make it happen. And so like all of those different things are available there. And so I really suggest you get to know the features and click around and, find what find the way that it works for you, because really in the end, yes, it's a free website and it's a, sort of a free service, but it should work for you. So really just hunt around and look through those features. If this has been helpful, I have a number of other Ravelry tutorials that I've done. I've touched upon some of these topics before, and I'm sure I've covered other things completely in other videos. So you can find those on my page on YouTube. Most of them were previous live streams. I don't think I have any separate published edited videos. So look around through the live streams, and there's a number of them that have Ravelry hints and tips. So with all that being said, I think I'm going to wrap up for the evening. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have other comments or suggestions on videos that you'd like to see in the live streams in the future, I would love to hear those. You can leave those in the comments section after the video posts, or you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Experiments in Crafting. You can send me direct messages there. And otherwise, generally we stream on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Central Time. I try to let everyone know on either Facebook or Instagram or on the community tab on YouTube if we're going to cancel the stream. It's been a pretty busy couple of months for me, and I've canceled more streams than I'd like to. So thank you all for joining me, even though we stream kind of sporadically. I do really enjoy doing this, but there are some nights where it's just not left in my power anymore, I guess. Like I'm just too tired when I get home, and I just feel like I would be babbling or couldn't come up with enough thoughts to make it interesting for you guys. So thank you all for watching, and have a great rest of your week, and have a great weekend, and see you next week. Good night. Bye.